Let's talk about one of my favourite crises, which is the identity crisis, becoming a mother, and the false narrative that we have that we can have it all.
Women can have it all, but perhaps just not at the same time. That false narrative that we can do it all and be it all, but we're setting people up to fail. You can have it all and be it all, but you need the right scaffolding around it. But then when I had a child and I was running a political party, I couldn't run a political party and have a newborn and be breastfeeding and be a really present mum. I felt like such a failure.
I pin so much of my self-worth onto my career. Now, when you become a mother, you lose so much of that.
I don't say juggle because I hate to say that we're clowns. Why waste a good crisis? Crisis is actually a great indicator of opportunity.
One of the biggest things holding women back from actually developing this is the guilt of getting support, the guilt of putting themselves first. Comparison is the thief of joy.
But we can learn from comparison when we look at what we don't want in our life. I'm fabulous at what I do, but I am so bad at laundry.
If you've ever been in a crisis situation, this episode is for you. And one of the things I love most about being able to bring this podcast to you is literally opening up my little black book of contacts and introducing you to some of my friends and some of the incredible people that I know. And Sally Branson is one of those people. Crisis in business, crisis in life, how to avoid it in the first place, then how to clean it up after it's happened. This is the episode for you. So as I said, welcome, Sally.
Oh, Amanda, it's so lovely to be with you. And what a beautiful combination of our personal interests and our professional interests.
Absolutely. So for everyone who doesn't know you, because I obviously know you really, really well, tell us a little bit about who you are.
So Sally Branson, as you said, I am a crisis and reputation specialist. It's all I do, crisis. So I like to think that we do a lot of preparation work to stop individuals, brands. We work with iconic Australian brands and global brands, but we also work with individuals. Some people are like, oh, I don't think I'm famous or important enough to work with you. But if you've got a crisis, we work with you. My background, though, is in political, military, defence and diplomacy. So I've had lots of professional experience dealing with a crisis. I've really learnt at the feet of giants, but mostly men in the crisis field. And so I saw that when I was thinking about what I was doing in my next stage, I actually fell into crisis again. I'd been doing it the whole time in my professional career, employed by other people. And then when I had children, I was on maternity leave and someone said, oh, I've got a bit of an issue. Can you fix it for me? So that's when I thought, well, let's do this all the time. And that's all we do. So I've got a small PR firm and we only do crisis and reputation.
And I love that something we share in common is that we take the lessons that we've learned throughout our professional lives and our businesses and we apply them to our personal life.
Yes.
So a lot of people have heard me talk about how I run the home like a business. So there are lessons that I know people are going to learn and get incredible value from today, learning about how you apply what you've learned in business and in crisis management to the personal life as well. I guess we're going to help people throughout this conversation feel really, really good when they're in a crisis.
Yes, and that's my whole aim. I just want people, crisis happens all the time. We know it professionally and personally, and particularly for women. Women are really good crisis managers personally and professionally. And I really like to give people comfort knowing that they can manage a crisis and treat crisis as an everyday occurrence. I think we get into this habit of thinking a crisis is this big thing that comes and ruins my life overnight. In reality, we deal with little issues and crisis all the time, professionally and personally. And how do we do that with comfort and with ease and process driven?
Let's talk about one of my favourite crises, which
Yes.
is the identity crisis.
Yes.
Becoming a mother, the false narrative that we have that we can have it all.
Yeah, and I think it's done us a real disservice. I think our generation, we've come behind a feminist wave, that there was that conversation that women can do it all and be all of it. And it was a former Governor General Dame Quentin Bryce, who said women can have it all, but perhaps just not at the same time. And I think there is that false narrative that we can do it all and be it all, but we're setting people up to fail because we're not getting the scaffolding right. What we're not saying is you can have it all and be it all, but you need the right scaffolding around it. Just like planning for a crisis, you need the right stakeholders, you need the right champions and allies, you need the right people to position you where you need to be. And I think as, you know, and I found this as a mum, I'd spent my whole career, particularly in politics. So we were in politics at the same time, particularly politics. I employed every mother that I could. I employed women who were coming back from maternity leave and didn't think that a federal political area was something that they could make work. I tried so hard to make it work for them, and I think I did make it work for them. But then when I had a child and I was running a political party at the time, I couldn't make it work. It was such a big ego piece for me, and I couldn't make it work because I knew that going into an election year, I couldn't run a political party and have a newborn and be breastfeeding and be a really present mum. That was I felt like such a failure. But in reality, it was just reassessing what my priorities were at the time and where I needed to focus that time and energy and what scaffolding I needed for that. And I think, you know, to have it all, you and I both run successful careers, successful businesses. We've employed people, we employ people, we have family businesses, our spouses have businesses. We've got all of those, I don't say juggle because I hate to say that we're clowns.
I love that.
I just think when we say juggle, we're not clowns. We've got competing priorities.
Yeah.
What we do have to talk about is the infrastructure we need. So as women, as mothers, as business women and as ambitious women, what infrastructure do we need to support having it all? And the other piece, Amanda, is what does having it all mean for you? What does it mean for me? For every person, it will look different and feel different. For the first piece is knowing what success looks like. What is your ideal outcome? There'll be things that, in particular in a crisis, I say, we can't fix it all. We can't make it all better. If something's really gone badly, bark will come off. There will be damage. But what's the best case scenario? How does it look? And what do you need to get there? Let's be intentional about what it will look like. What I thought success was 15 years ago isn't what I feel that success is now. And interesting, I've got a girlfriend who said to me when I had children and I resigned from my big job, aren't you ambitious anymore? And I said, I'm deeply ambitious still, but for different things. And I think it's understanding what we're ambitious for. And then what support we need to get there. So both my husband and I do a lot of managing and fitting things in and some compromise to make each of our careers work because we both love what we do, but also who we spend our time with. In our spare, precious, wonderful time, what do we do? Who do we do it with? So it's about being intentional about creating that scaffolding to have it all. And having it all is such an individual outcome.
Yeah, it depends what all is for you and redefining what all is when you're going through a new season.
Yes.
One of the taglines that we use for this show is ambition without compromise.
Yes.
And yes, there are still going to be compromises. It doesn't delete compromises, but it says don't compromise your ambition.
Exactly.
Your ambition can still thrive.
Yes.
And be tended to.
Yes.
So long as you are developing this structure, as you say, and we talk a lot about the different types of structures that we can put in place. One of the biggest things holding women back from actually developing this is the guilt of getting support.
Yes.
The guilt of putting themselves first.
Yes.
The guilt of, of wanting to be more than just a mum.
Do you think, Amanda, from your experience, there's also a fear around what will other people say? I think particularly on social media, we see these mums who look like they're having it all and look like they're doing it all, but we're not seeing what's behind the scenes. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I think, what will that person say if I've got a nanny? Or what will that person say if I've got a cleaner? Do you think that conversation, what's your experience?
Yeah, that's something that I initially, I guess, did struggle with, but I think I've worked through that to the point where I realised that anyone who does have, I guess, like a negative opinion or is choosing to live their life differently from me, like that's okay. So long as like my people get it, the people that matter to me understand it, and that I surround myself with like-minded people, then it can drown out a lot of that noise. But another interesting piece that's just popped into my head as you mentioned social media is that, and we talked about this pre-show, was how each of us spend less time kind of on social media because like you kind of just feel polluted, I guess, with the noise and the messaging and the opinions and cookie cutter everything. Everyone's spewing out life advice as to how you're meant to live your life. It's just exhausting and nauseating at times to constantly be bombarded with like so many different ways of doing it. And I guess people could be sitting there going, okay, well, you're running a podcast and you're essentially doing the same thing as well. But what I'm trying to do is obviously provide, you know, information to help people create a life on their own terms that actually lights them up.
Good, valuable content.
And like giving them the structure to actually move away from having to take anyone else's advice so they can actually look inward and actually build something that works for them, that's purpose built for their life and how they want it to be and like what dreams they want to chase and all that kind of thing, right? Essentially, if we use a word for that, it's being intentional.
Oh, do you know the whole time he's speaking intentional? Exactly. Yeah. And do you know that's the taking the lessons that we would learn, like if you and I have both worked in reputation and personal branding, we know that we say to our clients, if you want to get to point B, you're at point A, these are the steps you need to take for your brand and your reputation. And what we said before, you said, you know, running a household like a business. What are those lessons in being intentional? And I was just telling you, we did have a catch up beforehand because we are friends and we hadn't seen each other since December. So we had a good chat earlier. And for me, it was being that intentional. I was telling you I'd lost my mojo the other week and it was Monday and I was just really, I think I had got caught up in a bit of that negativity and maybe a bit of social media that I shouldn't have looked at and got a bit cross about some things that I couldn't control. I really had to sit down and be intentional and say, right, who am I spending my time with? What am I spending my time doing? So particularly now my children are 7 and 8, they're hyper aware of when I'm on my phone. So putting down social media serves two purposes. I want to model good behaviour to my sons and also I want to show them robust sites of information. Like I want to teach them how to be critical thinkers and to make their own decisions and to take information on and disseminate that in their own ways. So I think it's that intentional and I think it's about what you're promoting here. It's that service around providing value about how to be intentional, you know, how to create that life that we dream of, that our ambition is for, that works well for us. And I think part of it is, and I say this in crisis planning as well, what are your values? What really matters? And when you're clear on what they are, you're clear on your next path forward. And I spoke to a conference and I was talking and it was all family-run businesses. And they asked me about values-led crisis planning. And I said it's really simple. If you know your values, every step you take off is rooted in those values. So if you say you're an authentic brand and you've got a crisis and you communicate with your stakeholders, that means if you're in a crisis, it's on the front page of the paper, you give media commentary, you're up and about talking about it, you're doing press conferences, you're emailing your stakeholders, you're emailing your shareholders, you're showing that authenticity in action. That's a value. And the same as personally, like if we want to uplift other women, how do we do that in our job? If we want to be really present parents, how do we do that at home? And be intentional about that and be unashamed about that ambition as well. And I think for me, when my friend said to me, oh, you've lost your ambition, I really had to sit in that and think, no, I'm ambitious. I'm ambitious for a happy family. I'm ambitious for working with great clients on my terms. I'm ambitious for living a life that I think is really rich in the way that I think it's rich.
With crisis management, in terms of if you've got these values before the crisis happens, it's really important to uphold those values when the crisis is in motion and even thereafter. Because I think what can happen is we can become a bit incongruent on our own values when shit hits the fan. And so that in itself is a really good key takeaway for anyone listening is, you know, when shit hits the fan, take a moment to actually sit within the space of reflecting on what your values are and make sure that they aren't being like thrown in the bin.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because everything else feels like it's going in the bin at the same time.
It doesn't mean that your values have to, and also so if you've done that pre-work of being intentional, you know that. And the other thing is your values, people say values aren't made or character isn't made in a crisis, but they show up. The other thing is if you're in a crisis, personally or professional, and a value doesn't show up, maybe it's not your value. And maybe that's a litmus test or a way that you can say, actually, that isn't important to me. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's actually interesting you say that. Do you actually, in your professional view, actually see sometimes crisis as blessings, I guess, in disguise
100%.
in terms of allowing people to essentially, plan their next season or have like some kind of rebirth or recalibration on the other side?
100%. I'm so pleased. And you've seen that in your experience too, haven't you? Like when we first met, we knew of each other beforehand, but we were both in the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
You were in a different relationship to one that you were running a different business to what you are now.
Yeah.
And I know that you went through some really difficult times, and sometimes that might have felt like a trial by fire. And then look at the phoenix that rises from that. And I think there's a lot of sayings and cliches that why waste a good crisis. And a lot of people say that. I subscribe to that a bit, but I say that crisis is actually a great indicator of opportunity, especially if you've done all the pre-planning work beforehand and you treat crisis like a business.
Yeah.
But if you're in a crisis, the pathway becomes really clear because you think you have that gut and trust that intuition that, this is what I want for my life, or I never want to feel this way again. It's funny, when I was younger, I don't know whether I've told you this, but I used to do some PA work for Tony Robbins. There was that, if you don't want something, that it's either a hell yes or a hell no.
Yeah.
And he used to say, that the pathway, and he did a protocol where he got people to think about their very worst scenarios of their life. Like, let's get really deep into how would that feel if your worst case scenario came through, and people could sit in that feeling. And this was a long time ago, like this was when I was 20, this is 27 years ago, and people could sit in that feeling, and then that gave them the impetus to say, I never want to feel like that again.
Yeah.
And so I'll take action.
Which is amazing. But the problem I find sometimes is like we forget how we feel. Like things can feel really heavy in the moment, and then things start to get a little bit better again. So I think that's where the crisis management in terms of the scaffolding that you talked about before was really important. Sometimes you need to be in that really uncomfortable space where something feels so terrible and do something about it then to prevent it from happening again, because often things can just feel kind of fine and then we find ourselves back there again feeling those same feelings. Yeah. How we feel in moments of crisis, therefore, is like obviously like a blessing again. It is. But it's also a call for action.
If you don't act then, there does become like a little buffer, or, it's like when you have too many champagnes and you think, I'm never doing this again. I feel so bad.
How many times we say that?
How many times I'm never drinking again? I'm never drinking again. And then you go, and then the next thing you know, you're at Byron Bay at the pub listening to the dueling pianos till like 4 a.m. trying to get the microphone from the piano. And we do it again, and then we wake up feeling dreadful. So where is the trigger point that says, I'm not going to do that again, or I'm going to do it differently? Instead of drinking 1,700 champagnes, I'm going to stop after lunch and then stay on the waters. Personal experience there, a little bit of personal experience. But so I think it's important to remember how that feels. And I suppose that's another thing I think we've got in the habit of glossing over emotion. And again, back to that social media that we're seeing these sort of glossed over realities of people's lives, that we think that we need to gloss over feelings. The other day with a client who was going through a really hard time and their family, and I came home and I went to bed with my boys at 6:30 at night. I went to bed because I had been so present and so deeply feeling with my clients, and they were having such a hard time, and they were embarrassed that they were having a hard time, and they were embarrassed that they were crying, and all of these really big emotions because something had come crashing down that they'd worked so hard to build up through no fault of their own. It's not shameful to have those emotions and sit in that awful feeling. But if you've got something that you can do to make sure that you don't have those feelings again, I'm not saying we shouldn't feel miserable or sad or shame or anger or or grief, but it's knowing how to sit in them and saying, how do we learn from those?
I think some of the most successful women who are living life on their own terms, obviously very intentional, using this word a million times, I
know. This is going to be our next little hashtag.
They have a plan. Obviously being in business, you have a business plan, you plan to fail to plan, essentially. It's about having a framework, it's about having a plan, it's about having SOPs, it's about having all of this sort of stuff. Like we think sort of, more managerial in that respect of like setting up structures. I liked what we were chatting about earlier, talking about stakeholder management and taking the idea and the concept of stakeholder management from corporate or government world and applying it to your personal life?
So when I lost my mojo the other day, I was just like, oh. And we made a big move during COVID and left all of our support structures away. It wasn't overseas. It was just interstate. But with 2 little children, a 2 and a 3-year-old, and leaving all those support structures, I've often thought, where do I find my way? Because social interaction is so important, I think, because we need to have other people in our life who have similar experiences and can support us and be that village. I feel I grew up in a tiny country town of like 200 people. I went to school with 25 kids. That village and support structure is really important to me. When I'd lost my mojo, I was like, I just need to get back to building that village. I love a stakeholder map because you need to know in a crisis who you're talking to and where to meet your market. So I'm always, if I get another tattoo, it's going to be, one is going to be to what end? When people say, oh, we're going to do this. And I'm like, oh, to what end? Why are you doing that? You don't need to do it. The other one is going to be meet your market where the market is. So if you're in a crisis, if your stakeholders aren't on Instagram, but you're communicating via Instagram, that doesn't mean a thing. If they're on an EDM, that's where you communicate. Or if they're watching a current affair, that's where you communicate. So the most important people in my life are my family. And so every decision I make is about them. And that's my broader family. I care deeply for my brothers and my mum. And so what decisions do I make? Do we move overseas and move the business overseas? Well, that's not reality for our family unit at the moment because my mum's older. So they're my core decision making. But then the next level is, who are the people who are important to me? And if I want to live a happy life that's got rich social interaction, that when I need it, I have support, where I have fun, like fun's a real value of mine. Yeah. I love to have fun, but sometimes we get really caught up in being so busy doing the stuff that, and particularly as mums, I think we don't prioritise fun. So how can I prioritise more fun for me? And I know 3 or 4 people who are really fun. And so how can I spend more time with them? That's that stakeholder management. And another thing I do that we were talking about, so I grew up in a tiny country town. I'm still friends with my girls from that country town. Every year, non-negotiable, we go away for a weekend. No kids, no partners. It is a non-negotiable and we just have fun. We don't do any jobs. I always say don't stay in an Airbnb because we've got to clean it up before we go. But we do. We stay in an Airbnb. We have champagnes at lunchtime. We do things that we don't do in our normal life. But we make an effort. So that means that we don't just see each other once a year. Every week we're texting, in a group text. And it might be a funny meme or it might be something, but it's little touch points to mean that they're my stakeholders in my personal life. What do I need to do to manage it? Not manage in a controlling way, but in an intentional way. There's our word again.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all about planning, right? And this often happens to me that I might have like a spare moment to catch up with someone, but just like me, the majority of the women that I love spending time with are just as busy as I am. So we have this like calendar syncing, lining up issue going on all the time. Like it's not just like, oh, I'm available, like who's available? Like a lot of the time other people aren't available to hang out. The more proactive way of managing that would actually be to set up an annual girls retreat like what you're doing, or have specific, dates every month, planning in advance. It's all about setting up your calendar and your life and just being, again, more intentional about ensuring that including these things in your life.
Exactly.
And not just
the ambitions.
And we talked a little bit offline about this too. Like you and I are just always here, there, this thing, that thing. Like we're not great at being project managers or really mapping this stuff out. I think we both love variety. We hate monotonous, routine, mundane, always wanting to do different things. Mine's racing at 100 miles an hour, super creative, always looking for fun. My brother said at my wedding that I'm the ministress for fun with no consequence.
I love it.
And it's very true.
Is he your older brother?
Younger.
I was just going to say, that's not very birth ordery, is it?
No, he's always felt like the older brother, though, I must say. Like he took up on the male leadership role in our family.
I find this really hard. Like I find that setting structures hard because I don't like structure and I don't like strict routine, but I need the routine to do the fun stuff.
Yeah, it's just the consequences at times that I try to avoid because consequences to me have like a negative connotation.
But it's like a good connotation.
A consequence can be pain, right?
Yes.
It can be something uncomfortable, something that you're trying to dodge or avoid.
It's interesting. So last year I paid to have a business coach, an agency coach to talk about how I would grow and shape my firm. And this year I've used that professional development money, pay a behavioural psychologist who specialises in in habits and routines, because I too, and because I've had young kids, I'm like, I want them to have I don't want them to be going to, every Tuesday we must do this, every Tuesday we must do this. It's not going to be Taco Tuesday in our house. Well, as they've got older, A, kids love a routine, but B, routine and getting things. So I'll run in from meeting to meeting to meeting to the next, and it'll be big ideas and we'll have big solutions and really big thoughts. And then I'll leave the meeting and I'm like, who took meeting notes? What did I say in that meeting?
Yeah.
So it's doing things like now organising my calendar to say, half an hour after every meeting, I just have white time where I just think about what's just been said and I action. And then in that same time, I calendar next week's working time for that. So it doesn't get lost in my need for, the new next big thing that I need a consequences to do my job well, because so much is writing my job. So not only is she helping with that, but she's helping me with my home life by saying, you do need a Taco Tuesday. You need to have the same thing so you don't have the mental load of having to think every week about different recipes or having to do. And so thinking of consequence as a good thing, the consequence of me taking this action to organise this stuff that I find is really mundane actually frees me up to do all the other good stuff. So it's that reframe, isn't it?
It definitely is. It's the more organised you can be to cover your blind spots and the shit that we're not good at, essentially.
Yeah.
So we're both visionaries. We all need housekeepers. As visionaries, we need integrators. If we don't have that person, we have to follow ourselves up as an integrator.
Yes.
So what you just mentioned is super helpful, is like plan integration time, the exciting,
behind the sparkles,
shiny object chasing, to ensure that, any deliverables or anything that needs to be done thereafter is followed up upon. And it's, maybe it's undiagnosed ADHD that we both have.
I did ask my psychologist. And she said, no, you've got a really fast brain. And I think there's that conversation around when you lead, when you're entrepreneurs, when you bring new thinking in, we've got fast brains because that's how we've had to operate. And so there is, perhaps it's not a neurodivergency, but perhaps it's just the way our brains are.
Yeah.
And that's okay to say as well.
It definitely is. I think what can become a bit of a risk is, and where we will probably beat ourselves up, is we have these fast brains and then we go through major things like having babies and postpartum and things that deplete us, and that affects our neural pathways, and it affects our nervous system and our ability to
mental
actually
health,
continue to think fast.
And
then the brain fogginess and all of that sort of stuff coming in, it's like we self-sabotage one of our greatest assets, but then can also be feeling down on ourselves that we feel like we're failing because we're not able to operate. I know personally for me that's been a big thing. It's like a constant battle to try and get back to that sharp thinking, fast-paced mind, whilst you've got the mental load that we have to manage on top of that. And it's so crazy. I used to think, prior to being a mum, I used to think my days were so busy and I had so much going on and I didn't have a second. And you become a parent, you just laugh at that. You just think, oh my God, I was so naive. If anything, it makes us become more efficient. It makes us actually do the work that we're talking about today in terms of setting up scaffolding and structures and being very intentional about, all that sort of stuff, and realising who the main stakeholders are that we need to be showing up for and that we care about.
I suppose too, Amanda, one thing that I know you don't do and that I would love to see you do more is give yourself credit for all of those extraordinary things you do. You might have a bit of brain fogginess or, the postpartum, and that takes a long time to come out of, but give yourself credit for all the extraordinary things that you're doing within that space still. It's just different. It's not better or worse. It's just different. And that you're doing amazing things, but again, it comes back to that ambition around it just looks a bit different to what perhaps we thought it would 5 years ago. And I see this again coming back to the crisis stuff, while I say, and particularly as we move into the world of AI and, AI and crisis in how we're running our lives. I put my son's homework schedule into AI so I can manage to get it done by the end of the week. But what we need to give ourselves credit for is the EQ and the love that we're showing every day, and how we show up for other people and how we serve other people through our work, the work that we do. And that makes us really good at the managing all of these different competing priorities. And just think about the kindness that you need to show to yourself, that you're showing to all of your listeners, by giving them good solutions, by saying that we shouldn't compromise on ambition, and we should, stay true to our goals and find new and better ways. And look at all the value you're giving by day, having those conversations. And I think as women, we're naturally hard on ourselves because, you know, we like things to be a certain way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, type A personality, high achievers, and tying a lot of, I guess, like validation aspect into our careers, because you and I both know, you know, to work in politics is seen as being like pretty next level. Like there's a lot of respect that comes from being a political staffer. It helped me hugely in my business when I started that. I had that background. So I pinned so much of my self-worth onto my career and then my business and then being the business leader. You know, from a commercial, corporate, you know, business perspective, you feel really valuable. Now, when you become a mother, you lose so much of that. And unfortunately, we do live in a society that doesn't actually value what we trade. So we trade all of that off to do the mundane, monotonous things, or we get someone in to help us, which still is great. It's great to have the support, but it still feels like then you're failing in the other area because you don't want to outsource the care of your child, because as you've said, like there's so many things you want to teach them and be present and be there for them as well. So it just does shape and shift into a different sort of reality, I guess. But it takes time to actually get to the point where you can actually be proud of yourself for those things, I think. And we would go a long way if there was more acknowledgement for how hard mums work. Like I could never be a full-time stay-at-home mum. It is the hardest job. To work a 14-hour day, just constantly on being, you know, hearing mummy probably a million times a day.
I say my kid's old enough now. I'm like, you say that again and you give me $1.
You just don't get that $1 out of you. Like you might get the odd co-worker coming up and interrupting you and think, so annoying, I'm getting, you know, interrupted.
Yeah, but
while I'm
it's
just trying
not
to do my work.
Human. And I suppose we don't put that value on what it takes to raise. There's two things I want to say. I was speaking to a man who worked in politics and he and I were at really similar levels, and he is now the stay-at-home dad. I would say secondary career. Even that's problematic, but a caring career, and he looks after the majority. And he said there is nowhere else that you never get the feedback. In any other job, you'd get instant feedback on how you're doing. We've got to wait till they're 30 and 40 and to see if they're good humans. And the other thing around that, I always wanted a daughter. I've got 2 boys and I desperately wanted a daughter because I wanted to build a better feminist. I thought my mum had done a great job building me to a certain degree, but there are still things, particularly in a woman, like at one stage it was just me and 400 US Marines and 4,000 US Marines, which is a dream when you're single and 28. But, you know, I've worked in male-dominated industries all my life, and there are often times where it's me and 15 men around a round table and I was the only woman. And I know there was some real joy and experiences and opportunities out of that, but there were also some difficult times and I was treated in ways that a man wouldn't have been treated in my role. So I was always like, I'm going to have a daughter and build a better feminist or a stronger feminist, or I don't know what I wanted to build, but this was my goal. Anyway, I had 2 boys and it's only now, I adore them. It is only now at 6 and 7 or 7 and 8. They're 7 and 8. I adore them, but I don't know how old they're. They're 7 and they're 8. And it's only now that I'm realising what an obligation I have to raise good men who understand those gendered roles that traditionally fall to the woman and that mental load, and to get a really good understanding of the mental load is a real thing. It's not just something to be scoffed at or rolled your eyes at. So that's my job now, to build better men. And it just comes back to, you know, that's where I'm putting my energy. But equally, I can put my energy into, I've got an excellent business. I love that you said crisis queen. I'm really good at my job. Yeah. And if I can't say that now, when can I say it? I am good. I can fix things. I can come in, I can fix things and I can leave. I'm a solution finder. But it's at the scale that suits me. I only take clients who I choose to take. I only take a certain type of clients. There's some clients I won't take. I haven't got 17 or 18 staff. I don't want to be a big corporate agency. I just want to be the best to the people who matter. And that's my small group of clients and my little family.
Again, it comes back to building what works for you and not what you're hearing should be done, or not comparing yourself to what you see.
And I compare myself all the time. Like I do. I'm like, oh my God, it's such a waste, but I do.
Comparison is the thief of joy. But, you know, you need to live to actually figure that out, right? Yeah. Like, had I have not been in a similar situation where I had the agency and the 5 staff and hated the management side of it, and then realised I prefer to do more of like the one-on-one stuff and be like more of a one-man band with, I guess, some contractors and like people helping me out with some stuff. You've got to actually experience these things to eliminate what doesn't work for you. I think this is great for anyone who isn't a parent yet, or even hasn't really kind of 100% figured out what they want to do. Life is just all about a series of experiments. Like, go put your lab coat on. You're a scientist. Like, get out there, run some experiments, do some tests, see what actually feels right find more of what you don't want, because the more that you find of what you don't want, and that goes for everything, that goes for even in a partner selection, you know, who you want to be, your friends, everything.
We've all been there with people we don't want.
No, exactly. It's like this don't want list. As far as you can run away from that as possible is the direction towards where you're meant to be. And you've done a really good job of getting yourself there, by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
You've got some good balance going on.
It is.
No juggling, no clowns, no
juggling, no clowns. But also, that's not to say I'm not exhausted all the time, and I do go to bed with my boys at 7:30 at night.
Yeah.
But I'm up at 4 because I've got work that I need to do before I do.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. And I suppose when we talk about compromise, that's the thing. I'd love to have a sleep in, but I'm up at 4 or 4:30 or 5 every morning because that's my peaceful working time, and I can do some really deep work for my clients there. And also with crisis is that I need that scaffolding there because who knows what, you know, the other day, Jonathan, my husband, and I decided we'd go out and have a coffee, and there's a new coffee shop near where we lived, which was very exciting. So we sat down and had a coffee, and then I checked my emails and there was someone saying, we've got a crisis. Can we meet with you? Are you free now? And so I was like, bye date coffee morning. And I left. And that's okay because he recognises that, you know, that's important for our team as a whole. We'll make date night or date day up. We did then have date night. I need that scaffolding of getting up early to be able to then be really flexible during the day.
And I think that's the thing. I love being flexible. Like, is that flexibility actually equals, I think, the feeling of freedom, because you can just go like where you need to be or to whatever is going to actually give you the most energy. So I think it's really smart that you've almost gone, okay, so like the discipline side of me has to do X, Y, Z, so I can be almost like undisciplined and free and flexible in the afternoon. And that therefore creates like the perfect balanced routine for you. And that may work for some of the people listening as well to actually have
and
like
it
a
may
similar
not
structure.
work for people as well.
No, some people just need like full on discipline, structure, routine. I'm still kind of figuring out what works for me. Like I used to be someone who was very much routine, discipline, very strict on that. And I felt like that meant that I was able to stay on track a bit more. Obviously now I have a lot more sort of flexibility, but then I also have
You've got more
a lot of change, a lot of, you know, a lot of moving parts, a lot of travel, days where Ari's sick and can't go to daycare.
the sickness.
Or days when I don't have the nanny or the nanny needs extra support or backup. Like there's just so many moving parts. I hate the mundane world and doing the same thing monotonous. So I guess I'm lucky that I don't have that now.
But that's intentional.
It's intentional.
That's
I'm very
intentional.
grateful for, you know, the flexibility and freedom I have. The cost of that, though, is it kind of makes me a little bit frazzled.
Yeah.
It makes me take my eye off things at times.
And then comes back to intentional. So how can we make sure, and again, this is if there was that crisis planning but for personal. And I'm exactly the same. We are so similar. My kids are just a bit older and I'm a bit older. That's what I need to do. I'm really bad at self-care. Like I'm happy to admit that I'm really bad at self-care. I actually said to my husband yesterday when we sat down to have a business meeting, we actually booked an office space yesterday that wasn't our normal office space so we could shake up the venue because he knew I hate talking about finances. So he's like, let's book a fancy new office space and spend the morning in there. He said to me, you haven't exercised for 2 weeks. Like you haven't done any formal exercise for 2 weeks. These are the days you're putting it in the calendar for next week because we can make it happen there. And we're working hard. And that's the other thing is he's got his own business and he has to be physically there. He's a professional sports coach. Unlike me, I can do mine from anywhere. And we're working hard, but also that's intentional too because we want our children to see to be rewarded. We're very lucky, we're privileged in much of our upbringing, but we work really, really hard.
Yeah. And as a team too.
As a team.
You know, hearing that just reminds me of Jack and I and our dynamic. You know, he's been always so good at looking after himself with the self-care side of things. And I have not been.
Does that make you a bit resentful? Because it makes me a bit resentful because my husband's really good at self-care and I'm not.
No, like I'm glad that he's got it covered and I don't have to.
You don't have to worry about that.
Worry about that. I feel like he motivates me and inspires me to do more. Like just a simple thing. Like, you know, he's someone who will go and get massage if he's feeling like he needs, you know, that type of self-care. And I would, before I met him, I never went for massages.
Yes.
And he started introducing me to like going and having massages and stuff together. And so now like that's become something that I build into my routine when I need it that I didn't otherwise do. Yeah. And it's the simple things like he drinks a lot of water. Like he drinks like 3 litres a day.
Yeah, that's great.
I'd be lucky to drink a litre because I just forget.
Yes, same here because we're distracted by the other things.
So he's constantly, have you had water? Have you had lunch? Have you eaten? So like he looks out for me in the blind spots, I guess, of like where he knows I suck at self-care at times. So yeah, it's great to have someone who's modeling the example of how it should look like.
Yeah.
So there's not any resentment there. Like if anything, like I'm grateful that I've got someone to look up to
model
and to model that from.
Are you going for another massage? I'll just sit here at the desk and do a bit more work. No, I'm joking, Jonathan. When you're listening to this, I really appreciate that you get massage. But it's true, and I think though that blind spot, like my husband and I are very different people, and we bring different experiences. But at the core, we've got the exact same ambitions, and our ambitions are based in value and our values, and our ambitions are to do good work for good people, to raise a good family.
Yeah.
And so that's that core of the team, and that makes our decision making really clear. Does this decision support that ambition?
Yeah, it comes down to values alignment, and Jack and I talk about it all the time. We knew that about each other from the get-go. We were values aligned, and we had a very, very similar vision for how we wanted the future to look for both of us together. And I think that is the building blocks for like a successful relationship, because you see the future together, you're excited to go on that journey and build that together, and it all comes from the foundations of those values.
Which then you can take back to crisis management. When you've got those values and the foundations, the next step is an easy step because you know what matters to you. And I suppose that's the same with that. When we're talking about the next season, things radically change. And I know that you've got some guests on who are talking not about this early parenthood stage, but then moving in as women to perimenopause and menopause. And then that's the next shift. Yeah. But when those values are aligned and you've got the right scaffolding in place, you just move forward.
Great advice. I think we'll end the crisis conversation there, but I do have 3 questions that I ask every guest on my show.
I love this bit. I love this.
The season I'm in feels like.
It's the season I'm in at the moment feels like very grounding.
One thing I want to stop apologising for is
my messy house. Not being able to do the laundry. It's funny, but actually it's quite serious because I'm fabulous at what I do. I do things better than almost anyone else in the world at what I do. And if I'm saying that, if I can't say that here at 47, it's taken me a long time and a lot of hard work to get there. But I am so bad at laundry and remembering what day library day is for my kids. I'm a hot mess with that. You know, Fenton was like part-time kindergarten, and I walked to school with his library book, and in the car park I saw his teacher and I said, Mrs. Stansby, I've got the library book. It's a Wednesday and I've remembered it. And she said to me, that's fantastic, but it's actually not Fenton's school day. So here he was in his little uniform with his library book, and we're at the wrong day. So I've got to stop apologising for that because I do a lot of other things really bloody well. Yeah. So let's focus on what we do well.
I love that.
That's both of our mottos.
I love that. That could even lead into the next question. The last question I have is, I want women to know that
comparison is the thief of joy, but we can learn from comparison when we look at what we don't want in our life.
Love that. Great way to wrap up a very cool theme throughout our conversation. Sally, it's been so good having you here, and on a personal note, just being able to reconnect with you since December, personally. If people want to find you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
So I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and it's just Sally Branson. You'll find me there. I'm also on Instagram, the SBC group. And I've got a webpage. My email actually is so easy. It's just sally@sbcg.au.
Perfect. We'll make sure to pop them in the show notes. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. What a delight.